welcome to Getting Started with Apex. I'm assuming all of you are beginners to Apex. How many are beginners? All of you, good. We are actually doing this after a very long time. I mean, with LWC, Data Cloud, AI, we've been doing a lot of those sessions, but since Apex was always around, we've never given it much priority. But we wanted to now get it back by introducing all of you back to Apex. And before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. So we love your feedback. We want to make Dreamforce better for you. We want to make all of our sessions better for you. So do let us know how this goes. And if you're looking for something else, let us know for that as well so that we can cater to that. And forward-looking statement, please make all your purchasing decisions based on publicly available information and not based on what I might say today. You should have this by heart by now. You've seen it enough number of times. My name is Aditya. I work as a developer advocate with Salesforce. Pretty much you'll find me on YouTube and the Salesforce Developers blog. So most likely whenever you Google for something, it is me or my team that comes up on YouTube. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's a QR code. I'm not sure if you'll be able to scan it from that far, but give it a try. If not, just type my name on LinkedIn so that we can get in touch. With that, first I want to talk about the Salesforce platform. I'm sure all of us have heard about the Customer 360. Yes, the whole wheel that we have seen so far. So the Salesforce platform is the one that powers that wheel. So we give you all the tools that you need to build apps on Salesforce. And in fact, the Customer 360 is built on the Salesforce platform itself. So you're going to use the same tools that we use to build apps, which means you can extend all of the standard apps that we have or build custom apps on your own. And to do that, we give you a lot of different tools ranging from no code to pro code. App Builder is the most no code tool where you just point and click and create pages. You can drag and drop components, set permissions, change the layouts depending on what device you are looking at, whether it is a desktop or mobile, a lot of flexibility given to you just with clicks. And then of course, as you move in the spectrum, you have flows. How many of you are working with flows on a day-to-day basis? All of you are basically admins. So I'm assuming you're here to learn more about development, right? Cool. So flows, I don't need to give any introduction. And all of you already know that flows can also use Apex. All of your Apex actions can be used in flows. Now, towards the right of the spectrum, you have Lightning Web Components and finally Apex, which is why all of us are here today. So how do you define Apex? All of us know it's a programming language, but I would personally define it using those three words. So Apex is an object-oriented, strongly typed, and server-side programming language. Now let's unpack these words. First of all, we say it is an object-oriented programming language, which means it follows all the object-oriented principles that traditional languages like Java, C++, all of those are built from ground up using object-oriented concepts. Apex is nothing different. It also has a Java-like syntax, so if some of you are familiar with Java, you'll find this right at home. Now, in object-oriented concepts, there are two things that you need to know. One is classes and the other one is objects. So a class is nothing but a blueprint of whatever you want to do. And an object is multiple instances of that blueprint. So for example, if you take a car manufacturer, they're going to have a blueprint of how a car design should look like. So that is a class. And all the different cars that they manufacture, one might be of a different color, one might have different features. So all of that is going to be your different objects. So that's exactly how the classes concept in Salesforce works as well. The second point is it is strongly typed. In an Apex class, you can create what we call variables, which store different data types. In flows also you have resources and variables, right? So in a very similar way, in Apex you can define variables and each variable has a data type, which means if you want to store a text, you must define the variable of type text. You can't define a variable of type text and store a number. It's not acceptable. So that's why it is strongly typed. Finally, it's a server-side programming language. So what it really means, and the differentiating factor really here for Apex is that whenever you write an Apex class and save it, it gets directly saved on the cloud, it gets deployed to the cloud, and it gets compiled on the cloud as well. So like traditional programming languages like C++ and Java need you to compile the code locally, and then you get a compiled file that you then use. But in Apex, it's not that way. All you do is write your source code, deploy it, and we take care of everything else. And Apex is scalable. I'm sure you know Apex has been around since eons. So we've handled 220 plus billion transactions by now. So you really know we can scale. So where do you really use Apex? First and foremost, you can use it in UI controllers. So let's say you're building a Lightning Web Component and you want some data. You can write an Apex class to get that data for you and supply it to your Lightning Web Components. I'm talking about Lightning Web Components, but really it can be used in Aura and Visualforce if some of your implementations still have those. Next, you can use Apex for database triggers. So consider this to be an alternate for your before and after save flows. Your record triggered flows, you can replace that with Apex. Not that you should, but you can. Then you can also do batch processing with Apex. So let's say you have a logic that you want to run every night, or you want to do an export, or you want to clean up your data. Any logic that deals with a large number of records. So that is where you can use batch Apex, and this is one of the use cases for that. And of course, invocable actions. So whatever your flow is capable of, it's capable of a lot. But there are some things that a flow cannot do. For example, you can't take a JSON and parse that JSON inside a flow. But you can do that with Apex. So you can complement your flows with Apex. And finally, you can write tests. But does it mean that you will have to use Apex whenever you want? There's a popular saying, each line of code that you write is a line of code that you have to maintain. So you should be very cautious before you go ahead and start writing an Apex class. Is it really needed? Is there an alternate to Apex in Salesforce? You'll have to first look for that and use that alternate. The reason being, Salesforce, as you know, keeps updating its API versions, and with each version you get new features. And if you use point and click, your implementations are updated accordingly. But with Apex, you will have to explicitly go and use all the latest features and modify it. So there's a lot of work that you'll have to do. So if you're using Lightning Web Components, the first thing that we would recommend is for you to use Lightning Data Service, which is a JavaScript library within Lightning Web Components itself, which can get the data that you need without even having to write Apex. So explore that. Then there are many APIs that you can use. So try and do that. And flows. Now I can't stress this point enough that flows and Apex can complement each other. So don't think of your implementations to be either a flow or Apex. It can be a combination of both. Now coming to the $1 million question, how do you write Apex? For that, you're going to use this cool looking interface, which we call VS Code. And now what we have come up with is an online version of this that we call Code Builder. So you don't have to install any tools. Just like you open the developer console from setup, you'll be able to launch a Code Builder interface. And it's going to look exactly like this. No changes whatsoever. It's just that it's going to be on the web. Now to create a new class, you would open the command palette and you just need to select create an Apex class and then give it a name. So let's say Dreamforce 20. That's good enough. And once you create a class, this is what it's going to look like. It has a few keywords. The first one says public, which is what we call an access modifier. So this tells you where this class can be used from. And it can either be public or global. So public means it can be used within your namespace. If it is global, it can be used outside your namespace as well. So how many of you have worked with packages and namespaces before? Good. So you understand the concept of a namespace where your code is grouped into a particular logical set. Global denotes your class can be used outside that set as well. Now, with sharing and without sharing. This is a very important keyword for your Apex classes, because unlike everything in Salesforce, Apex runs in system mode. What it really means is that it bypasses all your permissions. So it runs as an elevated user, which doesn't really respect any of your sharing rules or field level security or profiles. Because Apex needs access to all of that by default, we provide access to Apex. Now with the with sharing keyword, what you tell this Apex class is that I know that you can access everything, but you only access the records that a user can access. So that is what this with sharing keyword denotes. Now if you don't want Apex to respect the user's permissions and then just query all the records, just write without sharing. Now why are we giving you this flexibility? Now in most cases, you obviously need to respect the user permissions. But let's take an example where you need to count the number of opportunities an account has. Now, as a logged in user, I might not have access to all the opportunities. In that case, if I'm trying to pull a count, I will only get a count of the number of opportunities I own. But then, realistically speaking, on the account, if I have a field called number of opportunities, I need that to be a count of all the opportunities. So in that case, I should actually be looking at all the records and not just the records that I can see. So that is the use case for without sharing. And of course, then you have the class keyword and name of the class. Now this is a very simple boilerplate class that gets created. Now this is a slightly more complex looking class, where what we have done here is we've defined a property, which is a Boolean variable. As you can see, we've given it a data type. Now in Salesforce, we have a bunch of different data types that you can use. It's actually a quite big list. If you're an admin, you already know all the different field types that you can choose. Most probably you'll have a corresponding data type for most of those field types, like date, date and time, Boolean. All of that has a corresponding data type in Apex as well. Now you can create properties. It is up to you how many properties you want to create. You can also create collections. Just like flows, you create a resource and you say that resource can hold multiple values. That becomes a collection. You can do that in here with the help of a list. And then what we have here are methods. So these methods can be invoked from a class to do certain operations on these variables. For example, what we are doing here in this particular method is that we are trying to add a new color to this variable. So this variable is a list that has 3 values. Whenever I call this method, I need to add a color to this list. So that is what this syntax denotes. Now once I have this class, I can deploy it. And how do I run this class? There are multiple ways in which you can invoke this class. You can call it from a button, you can call it from a Lightning Web Component, flows. We have seen the bigger list. But as a developer, I need not always deploy my class to all of those bigger things and then run the whole flow to get the output. I actually can run the script anonymously. So whatever is the code that I want to run, I can write it in a piece of text file. And from within VS Code, I can select the option execute anonymous Apex with currently selected text. So once I do this, you can see that the output comes back to me. And what am I doing in this class? So if you remember, this is my class called Apex Basics. And in object-oriented concepts, I told you that there are 2 things that you need. One is a class and one is an object, which is an instance of a class. So first and foremost, I'm creating an instance of the Apex Basics class. And from within that, I'm accessing the colors property, just using the dot notation. And then I'm calling the method to add a new color. And then I'm printing the colors back. And if you look at the output, you can see that initially it only has 3 colors. Once I've added white, it now shows 4 colors. So this is a very, very, very basic example of how an Apex class looks like. But I'm pretty sure that none of you are going to use Apex class to print colors. You're going to use it to interact with Salesforce data. So along with the traditional data types like integer, boolean, what we also have is an SObject data type from within Apex classes. Any object that you create in Salesforce, whether it is a standard object that is already there or a custom object, it is available as a data type within your Apex classes. Now remember a field called API name, which most of us overlook. We just type in a name, the API name gets auto-populated, we click tab and click save. Now that API name field becomes very important in Apex because within Apex we only deal with the API names. So if you have a custom object, it's going to be called __c in Apex, and this is how you're going to use it. So just like you've initialized a Boolean property or a list, you can initialize an SObject this way. Now let's look at a slightly more complex example. But before that, when you're interacting with data, I told you that there is a data type. But then you're going to interact with the Salesforce database as well. Now there are multiple operations that you can do. All of us know about the CRUD operations, create, read, update, and delete. So for that, we have different syntaxes in Apex. If you want to read the data, you use something called as SOQL or Salesforce Object Query Language, which is going to be very similar to a SQL statement. If you want to do a DML operation, that is data manipulation operations like create, update, and delete, you're going to have different keywords to do that. I already mentioned the most important statement, Apex runs in system mode by default. Now, if I take a look at, let's say, an account controller class. So I have two methods here. So the first method is actually creating an object. So we have seen the syntax. It's a simple account object initialization. Now to insert this into the database, all you need to write is an insert statement, say insert and the object name. Unlike the traditional programming languages, you need not use any complex database connectivity syntax, connect to the database, disconnect, all of that is not required. Just write insert account. Because Apex runs in system mode, this goes through. But if you want to respect the user permissions, all you can do is write insert as user account. It's as simple as that. Remove as user, it is system mode. Add as user, it is user mode. Now, whenever you want to query for records, you can query it using a SQL statement, SQL-like statement, which we call SOQL. So it's going to look something like this, where you select whatever fields that you want from whatever object that you want. And if you have a where clause, put in that where clause. Again, this is going to run in system mode. If you want to run it in the user mode, you can just write with user mode. And it's going to respect all the user permissions. So depending on what you want, Apex is pretty flexible. So in a nutshell, that was the basics about Apex. But what I also want to show you is governor limits. Now, let's say this was our Apex class. Now, if I try to run this Apex class, let's see what happens. So execute anonymous. It's all good. I get my output. But along with the output, if you remember, there's a lot of numbers that are shown back to you. And the most recent execution has given all of these numbers. So what are these numbers? Why are we giving you number of SOQL queries executed, number of query rows? Now Apex, along with being run on the server side, because it is running on the server side, it has certain limitations. Because the server is not just for one customer, it's a multi-tenant architecture where all of you are using the same server. So we want to make sure one of you is not jeopardizing the server by utilizing all its resources, which is why we have placed limits. For instance, if I'm querying for a record, I can only return 50,000 rows. So that is the maximum I can query in one transaction. So those are the limits that are placed. And after every execution, you get to see what the limits are and how many are remaining and how many have you consumed. And this is per transaction. Now, there are a lot of best practices to ensure that you're not running into these limits. So I would strongly encourage you to go and check out all the resources that are available to you. We also have the testing framework that is built in. Like I said, every line of code that you write is a line of code that you have to maintain. For flows, for anything else that you do, you never have to write a test class. But if you write an Apex class, you will have to write a test script to ensure 75% of the lines of code that you have written are tested by that script. Only then you will be able to deploy to production. So by default, we don't allow you to create an Apex class in production. You'll have to deploy it. And when you deploy it, it must have an associated test script with 75% coverage. All right. But to make it easy for you, because we are the world's first AI conference that we have going on, and to make it easier for all of you to start writing with Apex, we have Einstein for Developers that is currently in open beta, which means all of you can start trying it right now. Now, how have we integrated Einstein into your development experience? Right from within VS Code, you have what we call an Einstein sidebar, where here you'll be able to write whatever it is that you want Einstein to generate. So here the use case is that I want to make an integration to an external system. Ideally, it will take me 1 hour to write this line of code because I'll have to first read about the syntax, look at the endpoint, authenticate to it and stuff like that. But I don't have the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Einstein. I'll ask it to write an Apex method. And the more descriptive you are, the better the method is going to be. For example, what I've done here is I've also specified what is the JSON response that I'm getting from the endpoint. So I'm saying make a call out to this endpoint. This is the response that you're going to get, out of which I want you to return this property. So in natural language, I mention all of that. And as you can see here, it generates all of this code, including any wrapper classes that you need for the JSON object that you have given. So all you need to do is copy this code, paste it, deploy it, and you're done. But I'm going to give you a disclaimer. This may or may not always work for you. So you need to use your best judgment to ensure if this code is accurate and make minor tweaks. But this definitely is going to save a lot of time. So in a nutshell, that is getting started with Apex. If you want to learn more, please scan this QR code. You will be taken to a post which is going to contain a few links that can help you get started. So with that, thank you.